My name is Sarah Hoemke. I am a resource specialist with OC Parks, and I'm most often here at Ralph B. Clark Interpretive Center. My favorite part of working here is sharing these resources with the public. I love that we are able to make this, free. We have free programs, and that it's as accessible as we can make it, and that people from all over can come and learn about the resources in Orange County. The park itself started out before it was a park. It was the Emery Borrow Pit, and fossils were found here during that time. In 1956 to 1973, there were fossils that were found here, and they began excavation in the 60s sometime. When they were finished using it as the Emery Borrow Pit, which they basically took gravel out and different rocks and used them in construction of the 5 and 91 freeways. So once they were done doing that, there was some public push for it to be turned into a park. And so the county bought it in 1974. Then it was made into a park and opened in 1981 as Los Coyotes Regional Park. It was actually later renamed in 1987, Ralph B. Clark Regional Park. And I believe it was a year later, in '88, that the Interpretive Center opened to the public. So we actually do have more fossils in our collection than are on display here. We do have another location where a lot of those fossils are kept. However, we do our best to put as many on display as we can. So this building was designed to be a little bit expandable. We have actually expanded the room behind me. You might be able to see on the camera, I'm not sure. But the room behind me, that was actually added in 2009 to accommodate one of our larger exhibits, Joaquin, our whale exhibit, our Miocene whale. In the county collection overall, there are about 1 million fossils in our collection, and we have around 300 on display at this interpretive center, but there are also other interpretive centers where we have smaller displays and exhibits that people can go see in different places. So right now we're walking in the front door, and the first thing that you see right in front of you is that wall of shells there, and that is from the San Pedro Formation across the street. Those are representative of the types of animals that we find during that time period about 1.4 million years ago. Now, we are kind of walking through here a little later time period, which is the Ice Age here, and the mural right here shows kind of what that land looked like, or what this land looked like about, somewhere between, say, 200,000 and about 10,000 years ago. So we have things like our animals like our mammoths and tapirs and paleo llamas and paleo camel over there, and some smaller animals that we still have around today, like skunks and snakes and coyotes, moles and foxes, And so a good portion of what we have in this room is from that time period. The La Habra Formation is where we find them. Our display here kind of is set up to look like a dig site. Oftentimes when you find fossils, they're not always, especially in areas like this where we have sedimentary rock, they're found maybe kind of scattered, or they're found, not entirely whole. And so paleontology is, it's like solving a puzzle. So we have a lot of the different tools and different kinds of instruments that we use when digging in a excavation site. Things like paintbrushes and certain types of glue and various different kinds of chisels and sometimes dental tools that paleontologists use during, excavations, and also in our lab. Once the fossils are taken out, then they're brought into our fossil prep lab. So we are going through the Ice Age here. We're passing the Fossils of Coyote Hills display, where we have a representative fossils from each of the different layers that we find in this park. So the San Pedro Formation, which is that oldest one, the Coyote Hills Formation, which is just on top of that. On the other side, if you look at the cliffs across the street, once you walk outside or before walking in, the very top of the cliff is actually the, that Coyote Hills Formation. The Coyote Hills Formation. And then on this side of the street, we have more of the La Habra Formation, pardon me. So we're walking more into where, the fossils that we find in the Ice Age, things like the horse and camel fossils, and we have a display of the mammoth molars and the mastodon molars. Now, this is an interesting display because it describes the different types of teeth that these animals had. They're distant cousins, but their teeth are very different. Mammoths were more grazers. They ate grasses, so the cusps are really, squished in together, good for grinding up those grasses. And the mastodon, you can kind of see it from this side, has teeth that are more cone-shaped, better for browsing, for crunchy things like leaves and twigs and bushes, things like that. And we have, so we're moving on through some of the Ice Age. We have our saber-toothed cat and horse. But one of my favorites is over here at the Harlan's ground sloth. So this is a giant ground sloth, one of several giant ground sloths that lived in the Ice Age in the Americas. Harlan's ground sloth was not the largest ground sloth, but it was still a pretty impressive size. So this is the fossil itself. This is the pelvis and vertebrae from a single individual. And it's inside of a fossil jacket. That's what this, the enclosure is called, that plaster enclosure. So when we remove fossils from the environment, we protect them using kind of a cocoon. It's called a fossil jacket, made out of plaster. And then it's taken back to the lab, and that sometimes the bottom is kept in order to maintain the integrity of the fossil, so that it is, so that it doesn't fall apart, because they're very fragile, some of these fossils. Now, if you took this and you put it here, and kind of flipped it around, but put it here on this animal, this is the scale of that animal. This is a replica, but it's to show you what this animal looked like. And on this side, we have our ancient bison and giant bison. These are also animals that were here during that time period, during the Ice Age. Most of these, the megafauna, the bison, these giant bison, ancient bison, and the mammoths and giant ground sloths, those megafauna big animals, they went extinct just about around 10,000 years ago. Somewhere a little bit before or around 10,000 years. So now we are, let's see, we've got our tapir over here. We did have these animals here as well, a little larger than the ones you find now. Just like we still have some bison around, we still have some of these other animals as well, but they're not found here anymore, and they're not quite as large as they were during that time period. So we do have our display here that kind of gives an idea about how the land was pushed up over time. So this is sort of a hands-on display as well that people can kind of lift, and of course we're lifting very quickly because this change happened over millions and millions of years, millimeter by millimeter sometimes, but the land was pushed up over time, and from being underwater entirely to being dry land now. The same goes for this display, where we are starting out in the Cretaceous with water covering most of Orange County, and to the Miocene 23 to 5 million years ago, where there's a pocket that's a little bit, on land. But this area here, where the star is still underwater. And then we find the Pleistocene. And we are fully above water in this area, and most of Orange County by that point was dry at that time. So here's our dinosaur. We're going back in time to our dinosaur. Now, these little rock-looking things here, those are dinosaur toes. This is from a hadrosaur, which is a duck-billed dinosaur. Not a huge dinosaur, but pretty good-sized dinosaur. We have its toes, a few fragments of its skull, a foot bone, some vertebrae, and we also have other types of fossils that are found from that time period. So it's not just the land animals, because it was underwater. We don't have that many examples of land animals at that time, but we do have plants and sea life, lots of sea life that we find from the late Cretaceous. Things like ammonites. So this is one of the ammonites that we've found here in Orange County. Ammonites, we find the shell of the animal. It's a squid-like animal that lived during late Cretaceous. It's a distant cousin of the nautilus, but they are extinct now, the ammonites. One of the neat things about this particular one is not all ammonites have preserved sutures. So those little fractal patterns that are on the shell in this area towards me here, they are where the septum walls meet the outer layer of the ammonite shell. So when that's present on a fossil, it makes it easier to distinguish the species of the ammonite. So it's kind of neat because it's not always preserved, but this one has a pretty well preserved portion of it has those sutures. And now we're going a little bit forward in time to the Miocene. So we do have several Miocene fossils that are in this room. We have an ancient porpoise, which is about 10 million years old. We have an albirinid dolphin, which is one of the first true dolphins, which is somewhere between 2 and 8 million years old. So part of it is the layer in which it's found, right? Context is really important. So what is found in an area or in a rock layer helps us to determine that. There's a few different ways. There's carbon dating. There's different ways of determining the geology. The geology is really important. And then behind me we have Joaquin. So this is Joaquin, our walking whale. He didn't actually walk, but he did still have some leg bones. So all ocean mammals have an ancestor that walked on land at some point, if they are mammals, just the mammals. If they breathe air with their lungs, if they, if they have live birth, give milk, mammals, they have an ancestor that lived on the land at some point. And one of the great ways that we can tell is through the fossil record. So if you look at number 9 and 10 here on Joaquin, that is basically a femur and pelvis bone. They weren't actual legs. These were probably inside of the whale's body. He couldn't actually walk on them. They're way too small. But they're just sort of leftover bones from when its ancestors did walk on land. So they didn't need them anymore at this stage, but it also doesn't hurt them to have those bones there. So they got smaller and smaller until, there's still, every once in a while we still find small bones. So most of these were also found in basically the same or similar areas. So this was in San Joaquin Hills at the transportation corridor. During that excavation in 1993, when the toll roads were put in South County. That's when Joaquin was found and when a lot of these other animals from that time period in that same layer, essentially. Yeah. Now, this room was an addition to the Interpretive Center. They actually added it in 2009. And so, it was a really nice little addition that we can, use to show some fossils from other places in Orange County, and that's kind of where we are now. In the future, we may have some fossils that are moved around or different. We are looking into some changes in the Interpretive Center, but for right now, that's what it is. We get to one of my favorites. I think my second favorite, maybe. The Paleoparadoxia. So this is the skull here. And normally we also have its forelimb over here, but temporarily in place of the forelimb that's undergoing some maintenance, we have some teeth from the Desmostylus. So this is a similar animals. And we have, this is a part of its foot as well. So if you can see in the rock, there's kind of a spongy pattern. That's its toes. That's actually the bone and its toes there. And then we have some teeth here. So the Paleoparadoxia, it doesn't have really any modern relatives, maybe very, very distantly it's related to the manatee. It scoops seagrass with those front teeth, and it has very flat teeth that would chew the seagrass up. It was definitely an ocean animal. We find it in the Pacific coast, up the Pacific coast, as well as in Japan. And yeah, it looked a little probably like a hippo. That's what the paleo artists have determined that it looked like based on its skeletal structure. But it has been extinct for millions of years. This one is about 10 million years old. And again, it doesn't have very very close ancestors that are very close relatives that we can compare to. But it's an interesting animal. It's one of my favorites because we're still learning so much about the Paleoparadoxia. Okay, so one last thing. We have these scale bar cards at the front of the reception area all the time. And they are really useful for a couple of purposes. One, you can use them to measure things. They fit in a wallet. But you can also use them if you happen to find a fossil or an artifact, or what you think might be a fossil or an artifact in the park or in any of the OC parks. We ask that you leave it where it is, because it gives us a lot more information about that fossil if it's left in context in the area where there might be other fossils or other clues to that animal, or when it lived, how it lived, who it lived with. So we ask that you leave the fossil or artifact where it is, and use this by putting it next to whatever, we'll say, whatever you might have found, so that we can see the scale of it, how big it is. And then on the back, there are instructions on how to send that photo to us, along with location information, so that we can identify it. And maybe it's a really scientifically valuable fossil or artifact. And if it is, you get name recognition for it. So we do ask, though, that you leave it where it is, because we really want to maintain that, that stewardship. I mean, again, that's what OC Parks does, is we want to have everything available for the public, to use and to preserve it and protect it. And so you help us a lot when you use things like these cards, to let us know that you found a fossil or artifact, but then leaving it where it is. That's the most important thing. And yeah, you might get your name on a fossil, or a fossil named after you.